Good day to each and every one of you. For today's discussion, we will talk about the internal and external institutions as well as the influences of corporate governance. We hope that you will learn something by the end of the video. But before anything else, here's our learning objectives for this chapter. First is to show the legal framework that affected corporate governance locally, enumerate and explain the internal foundation of corporate governance, explain the functions, duties, and responsibilities of Board of Directors, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Finance Officer, and shareholders, enumerate and explain the different external environment of corporate governance, explain what anti-takeover defenses mean, including its advantages and disadvantages, understand and explain shareholders' imposable limitations, and lastly, identify and expound on the leading behavioral management theories that contributed to the understanding of human behavior at work.
Okay, the foundation of good corporate governance lies in the intellectual honesty of senior management and directors, with a focus on operating in organization's best interests. It is important to prioritize quality over quantity in governance, and mindless compliance is not a good governance. Being transparent is crucial for informing stakeholders of both positive and negative aspects. A company needs a right people, team, processes, and board must adopt an inclusive stance while taking stakeholders' interests into account. In the 21st century, governance, strategy, and sustainability are inseparable, leading to long-term strategy encompassing financial, human, social, environmental, and technological aspects. In order to attract capital in globalized and competitive market, director must apply good governance principles and strike a balance between risk and reward. Next is the corporate governance in the Philippines. In the context of corporate governance in the Philippines, past scandals such as collapse of BW Resource Corporation in 1999 led to a need of increased accountability and rigor in auditing. Corporate governance is needed to make corporate managements more accountable and their auditor more rigorous. The Philippine Security and Exchange Commission or SEC addresses this issue by the Code of Corporate Governance in 2002 under SEC Resolution 135 dated April 4, 2002, effective under penalty. The code aims to enhance investor confidence, develop the capital market, and foster sustained growth. It applies to registered or listed corporation, permit or license grantees, public companies, and foreign corporations, branches, or subsidiaries operating in the Philippines. The Board of Directors shall primarily be responsible for establishing vision, mission, strategic objectives, and monitoring management's performance. The Board shall also constitute committees in aid of good governance, such as the Audit Committee, who is tasked with instilling the board members the significance of the robust internal control system and the board's oversight responsibility. Second is the nomination committee is tasked to assess and analyze the qualifications of individuals nominated for position on the board. And lastly, the compensation of remuneration committee, who is responsible for creating a formal and transparent procedure to develop a policy regarding the compensation of executive within the organization. This code or the code also emphasizes the importance of corporate secretary who must be a Filipino and officer of the corporation. To fulfill their responsibilities, the board member must receive complete timely information continuously. The board is primarily accountable to shareholders and the management is primarily accountable to the board. The board recommends an accredited external auditor for independent audits with a rotation every 5 years or earlier for handling pattern through the audit committee. The code underscores several stockholders' rights, including voting, preemptive power of inspection, right to information, right to dividends, and aspiral rights. Management is encouraged to establish a performance evaluation system for the board and top-level management. Transparency, highlighted in the code, is essentially prevented misappropriation of company asset. Corporations are mandated to develop governance rule aligned with the code, presented in manual form for director reference and SEC submission. Failure to adopt a governance manual may result in penalty of 100,000 pesos after due notice and hearing. All affected corporations must submit their manuals by July 1, 2002 with effectiveness starting on January 1, 2003.
Now let's proceed to internal foundation of corporate governance. Board of Directors. The Board of Directors is a group of people elected or appointed by shareholders to oversee and make important decisions for a company. They're like the boss of the bosses, making sure everything runs smoothly and aligned with the company goals. They have a big role in shaping the company's direction and making sure it's successful. Now let's proceed to authority and responsibility and purpose of the Board of Directors. They have the authority to make important decisions and set policies that guide the company's direction. At the same time, they have the responsibility to protect the shareholders' interests and ensure decent return on their investment. Their purpose is to provide strategic guidance, monitor the company's performance, and make decisions that promotes its long-term success. Structure and makeup of the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors is made up of men and women who are elected by the shareholders. They bring different skills and viewpoints in making good decisions. This diversity helps the boards to be effective and the company to succeed. Next is the Committee on the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors has committees like audit, nomination, and compensation. The Audit Committee oversees financial reporting and compliance. Next is ownership structure and its impact on the Board of Directors. The ownership structure of a company has a direct impact on how effective the Board of Directors can be in governing the organization. Understanding the ownership structure helps us grasp how it influences the dynamic and effectiveness of the board.
Now, let's talk about the Chief Executive Officer or CEO. He or she is a singular organizational position that is principally accountable in carrying out the strategic policies and procedure as established by the Board of Directors. Because the Board of Directors is above the Chief Executive Officer in this case, the Executive Officer reports to the Board. The CEO carries the obligation of aligning the company both internally and externally with its objectives in the long run. Here are the 5 typical responsibilities of the Chief Executive Officer. Number 1, support to the board. One of the responsibilities of the Chief Executive Officer is to support the operations and administrations of the board by giving information and advice to board members. Number 2, delivery of program, product and service or PPS. It is his or her responsibility to administer design, marketing, promotion, delivery, and quality of programs, products, and services because he is expected to be the brand bearer. Number 3, financial, risk, and task management. The Chief Executive Officer should recommend yearly budget for board's approval and cautiously manages organization's resources within the bounds of budget guidelines. Number 4 is the human capital management. The Chief Executive Officer should efficiently manage the human capital of the organization based on sanctioned personnel policies and procedures that fully conform to current laws, regulations, and standards both local and international. For the 5th responsibility of the Chief Executive Officer is the public relations or PR. It is his or her duty to pledge that the organization and its mission, programs, and initiatives, products, and services are consistently presented in strong and physically visible manner to the community. It is also the job of the Chief Executive Officer to package and build a positive image of the company to its relevant stakeholders. Let's proceed with the Chief Financial Officer. More than just a glorified accountant or someone whose long service to the organization has been rewarded with a fancy title, a Chief Finance Officer or CFO has a number of responsibilities within the corporation that are essential in providing a strong financial foundation for growing and expanding business. The choice of whether to appoint a Chief Financial Officer or CFO is frequently challenging for many privately held companies, and there is a frequent confusion among business owners regarding the responsibilities and actions of a finance officer. Through this means, here are some of the critical areas which an effective CFO will work on in discharging his functions. Number one, implements internal controls. A CFO will be the one responsible for conveying the important financial controls to a company. At a higher level, a CFO should also develop effective controls that provide supervision against fraudulent activities. Number two, supervises major impact projects. Outside of implementing and monitoring company controls relating finance, an effective CFO will also handle and supervise those projects that require significant quantitative and qualitative interpretations and analysis in order to reach an understanding of the options that are available. Number three, develops relations with financing sources. One of the most important responsibilities of an effective CFO is to institute good working relationships with banks and other financial institutions that may impact on the company's ability to finance its operations. Next, advisor to management. An effective CFO is also an important member of the management team of some emergent companies. Next, drives major strategic issues. A good CFO can also be expected to take part in attending some of major strategic issues that will have an impact on the company's long-term future. A CFO will also play a significant role in an endeavor of the purpose of which is to seek investment from the public or financial markets, especially in times when the company is having an initial public offering or IPO. Next, risk manager. The CFO is on the best position to foresee risk considering that they have this rare perspective on how the company operates. Next, relationship rule. More than CFO is the nucleus in an organization with many connections. The CFO will work together with the CEO, the board of directors, the audit committee, internal auditor, and external auditor. CFO serves the bridge between a variety of parties within the organization. Last is the objective referee. CFO needs to demonstrate impartiality, such as when advising the CEO or the board of directors on accounting matters. The CFO can and should be a trusted advisor in these matters of financial compliance reporting.
So, let's talk about the shareholder rights and responsibilities. In pursuing the rights to information and influence, shareholders must keep in mind their responsibilities. So, the number one of their responsibilities is they must ensure that the obligation to provide information to shareholder does not detract from the company's ability to compete in its marketplace. So it means that they're obliged to give an information that is reliable, relevant, and has basis to secure the company's ability to compete with others. And of course, as a shareholder, responsibilidad nilang makapag-provide or makapagbigay ng relevant information about sa financial performance ng company, and they need to be transparent about it and use as their competitive edge. Number two is they must ensure that their right to attempt to influence the company does not translate into behavior that is paralyzed and detrimental to the company. So, this means that as a shareholder, when using their right, they must ensure that their decision and actions must be beneficial and does not give a negative result to the company. They must ensure that they don't give a negative action or their action don't give a negative result to the company to secure the stability of the company. So for this part, it will talk about the reviewing the role of shareholders. Under the Corporation Code of the Philippines, this matter include affecting certain merger or reorganization. So, affecting certain merger or reorganization talks about the authority of the shareholder to approve or disapprove the merger or reorganization of the other company. Number 2 is selling all or substantially all of the corporation's asset. So, in this part, this talks about the authority of the in other term, the shareholder has an authority to sell the corporation asset prior to the need of the corporation. Number 3 is adding or removing any restriction on the business that the corporation may carry on. So, shareholder also has an authority to add or remove any restriction on a business of the corporation. For number 4 is changing the corporation's share capital. So let's talk about it. For the number 4 is shareholder also gave an authority to approve the changes of the share capital of the corporations. Maybe the shares of the other member of the corporations and so on. So, number 5 is increasing or decreasing the number of directors or the minimum or maximum number of the directors. So, the number 5 is they also has a role to increase or decrease the. What I mean is they also have a role. They also has a role to approve the increase or decrease of increase or decrease of the number of directors. It's either may gusto or may kailangan silang idagdag or tanggalin sa mga directors. So that is number 5. For number 6 is confirming bylaws. We all know about this. So for number 7, the last one is adding or changing restriction on the issue, transfer or ownership of shares. So sa number 7 is this refers to the authority of the shareholders to add or change the restriction sa issue at sila rin ang may authorize para i-approve or i-transfer ang ownership ng shares. So for the next slide, let's talk about the shareholder ability to change the board. So shareholder who are dissatisfied with how the director are running the corporation may remove the directors or refuse to re-elect them. So it means that, as mentioned earlier, the shareholder have an authority to elect or re-elect the directors. They also have authority to remove directors if hindi sila satisfied or hindi nila nagugustuhan yung duty ng yung duty or ginagawa ng nasabing director. Next is in practice, this may be a difficult course to take, particularly where the share of the corporation are widely held. So in real life, when we are in the real situation, mahirap gawin ang action or mahirap i-enforce ang action na ito, particularly if the director or the said director has a huge or may malaking amount of shares sa company, because if conflicts may occur, this may be affect the company. It means that if yung conflict na yun is if yung conflict na yun is lumala or na-enforce yung let's say, termination, and yung na-terminate na director is, yung na-terminate na director is, or natanggal na director is may malaking share sa company, maapektuhan ng malaki yung kumpanya dahil sa as mentioned earlier, the removed director has a huge amount of shares.
An effective corporate governance contributes to the long-term value creation of an entity, sustainability, and trust in the business community. So here are the external environment under corporate governance, which includes auditors, legal environment, markets, and other factors, including political environment, technological environment, and the social environment. So to start with, we will be talking about the auditors first. So auditors are those people who ensure that firms are run efficiently by keeping accurate records, adhering to the standards of reporting for public purposes. Independent auditors examine and evaluate financial statements and records of organizations. They play an important role in providing assurance to stakeholders regarding the reliability of financial information which they communicate for various entities such as companies, potential investors, individual clients, and the government. The legal environment refers to the framework of laws, regulation, and legal institution within which businesses operate. It encompasses various aspects of the legal system that impact business activities, including corporate governance, contracts, intellectual property, employment relations, consumer protection, and problem resolution. This is derived partly from the general political climate in a country. It is or it has three distinct dimensions, and those are the domestic laws of the home country, the domestic law of each foreign market, and the international law in general. Markets, on the other hand, is considered as the most important institution of corporate governance. There are basically central and important points of the term markets, and these are the firm's product market, the capital market, and the managerial labor market. So the product markets are considered as the most feared disciplinarian by managers due to the no market, no firm belief. Capital markets favor those who have good track records in terms of governance. Furthermore, the labor market speaks about being an important variable in selecting the right people for positions in the company. As mentioned previously, there are also other external factors, including the political environment, the technological environment, and the social environment. So, the political aspects of a country significantly influence the policies and benefits that an organization applies. The political environment shapes an organization both internally and externally in a way that this serves as a major pool from which the human resource of an organization is selected. When an organization is not quick to adapt to the new changes, this may become a threat in a way that our organization's processes and systems may be out of date. This is why it is essential for an organization to quickly adapt to the technological environment and keep the organization updated on a repetitive basis. Lastly, the social environment is practically the ecosystem wherein the organization thrives. It speaks about the society, comprising the general behavior and the ethical beliefs of the individuals who are responsible for the operations and the long-term existence of the organization.
A wondrous day ahead. I am Urian Golchano. So, at this portion of the report, I am going to briefly discuss the liability issues and indemnification of officers and its succeeding topics. So without further ado, let me get started. Liability can accrue for officers and directors when they cause financial and non-financial harm to the corporation or within the organization, or when they act solely on their own behalf, which is detrimental to the corporation. So with this can be in a form of commission of a crime and other wrongful acts. Um, Kapag kasi pag sinabi natin detrimental, this is something that an act is erroneous or harmful. So if that someone or like specifically an officer or director tends to do a harmful act or erroneous act to the corporation, that's the time like when we can consider it as a liability issues or something like an erroneous act, which is in the form of commission of a crime or other wrongful acts. So with that, we have to consider the personal liability of officers and directors. So according to the course material or like the course pack that we guys are following, we have here the following issues that may be subject for officers and directors to personal liability. First dyan is yung issues involving misappropriation. So I think one of the best examples that I could give here is that, take for example in a company, we have this so-called CEO. Take for example, I am the CEO of the organization or like the company itself, and I was tasked to take care of the funds, take care of the credits. So with that, of course, I have given this monetary package. So this money that I am holding on is obligated. Kumbaga, may panggagamitan. With ito siya ibabayad ko sa mga credit bills and other expenditures na meron yung isang company. And if I fail to do my task, what are the reasons? Of course, I did use the money for my personal preferences. Take for example, I used the money erroneously. May ginawa ako, pinambili ko siya ng ganito, ininvest ko siya, or something like I did expense it for something na hindi naman correlated sa kung ano ang task na ibinigay sa akin ng company. With that, that's where the involving of misappropriation could induce. So issues involving misappropriation is something like that. Another one is the issues involving non-disclosure of conflicts of interest. Siguro, yung non-disclosure of conflict of interest, it should be disclosure of conflict of interest. Kasi syempre, in accordance to the healthy environment and healthy, work welfare of the company, we should have the disclosure of conflicts of interest and pursuant to the policies that we have to address. Policies that are addressing conflicts of interest. Next is yung issues on loyalty. Just like what I've said earlier, kung loyal ka, you have to diligently do your tasks according to its proper alignment. So if the objectives is for you to do this one appropriately, you must have to do that one faithfully. Another one is the issues on non-separation of personal and business concerns. Of course, yun yung sabi ko kanina. Non-separation of personal and business concerns. If you are traversing some personal stuff on your own, you should not have or you should not use some assets or like values that your organization or like your company does have in order for you to suffice what does your personal needs ought to have. So mali yun. So dapat isa-separate natin yung personal belongings natin or your personal issues natin and also yung concerns na meron lang dun sa business na tinatahak natin. And the last one is yung issues on prudence. Of course, in every important matters, being prudent is a pivotal aspect. It's very imperative for us to consider more prudent towards achieving goals, towards achieving what the envisions or what's the mission and visionaries does our company or like our business firm has or have. Ayan. So ngayon, proceed tayo dun sa indemnification of officers and directors. So, with this, it refers naman to the act of the reimbursing officers and directors for expenses incurred, liabilities accrued, and yung amounts paid in defending claims brought to them for actions taken on behalf of the corporation. So with this, pag sinabi kasi natin reimbursing, um, ito yung, siguro sa simple term or simple phrase, or simple word, ma-refer natin siya as repay. Um, Kaya nga dito, ito yung act kung saan yung officers and directors natin magre-reimburse sila. Magre-repay sila lahat ng mga na-accrued nila ng mga liabilities and obligations. And of course, yung kailangan nila i-compensate ng mga bagay na they did cause harm to the within the company itself. So, we also have the directors and officers insurance, or tinatawag ito siyang D&O insurance sa madaling salita. So allow me to read first its basic description sa course material. With this, yung corporations now were allowed to purchase insurance to cover matters resulting from acts taken by officers and directors. So this insurance coverage is different and separate from the general liability insurance the corporation purchased for the corporation itself. So, meron akong mga hinanda na mga katanungan na magsasagot in accordance or in pursuant to the topic itself. So ito, first question, what would happen if your business or a member of its leadership team was accused and subsequently sued? Would your organization and its leadership be able to respond? So do your current insurance policies provide the protection you need? If the answer is no, now is the time to consider directors and officers' liability coverage, which is referred to us as directors and officers insurance. So, kumbaga, ang point lang dito, ang sistema na ito is in accordance or like in respond swiftly sa lahat ng mga alleged acts and wrongdoing acts or such as yung mga erroneous activities na nangyayari sa loob ng corporation or like ng company or generally speaking sa business firm. This is to protect, to guide, and to like, rinse everything happen na very obnoxious. Yung mga hindi dapat mangyari or such as like yung mga unpleasant things, yung mga harm things. Kasi hindi lang yung directors and officers natin ang madadamay dito. Hindi lang yung assets nila mismo ang masasurrender dito or like magkakaroon ng parang hindi lang yung assets ng mga directors and officers ang mapapabayaan dito, but also the balance sheet mismo or yung financial statement mismo ng isang organization. And that's very vital, that's very imperative kasi that's when we calculate our cash flows, and cash flows refers it showcases how the company or like the organization or like the corporation itself is performing well ba or not. So with that cash flow, doon natin makikita if like the company itself is performing better or not. So it's very pivotal for us to consider. It's very imperative for us to to respond swiftly, which is this system is trying to like, advocate to us. So I think that's all for the topic that I humbly assigned with. I hope that I made clear things. I made things clear out of my sides and out of my utmost humility and of course force of knowledge. Thank you so much.
So the next topic is all about the shareholders' imposable limitations. So a company may have different types of shares that come with different conditions and rights. So there are four main types of shares, which is the ordinary shares, cumulative preference shares, and redeemable shares. So what is ordinary shares? Ordinary shares are the standard shares with no special rights or restrictions. So an ordinary share, it is also called as common share. It is a unit of equity ownership in a company. Ordinary shares are sold on public exchange and generally give their owner the right to a single vote at a company shareholders meeting. Unlike in the case of preferred shares, the owner of ordinary shares is not guaranteed a dividend. So next is the cumulative preference shares. So cumulative preference shares, if a dividend cannot be paid 1 year, it will be carried forward to succeeding years. Cumulative preference shares are a type of preference shares that has a provision that mandates a company must pay all dividends, including those that were missed previously, to cumulative preferred shareholders. So next is the preference shares. It is carry a right that gives the holder preferential treatment. Preference shares are company stock with dividends that are paid to shareholders before common stock dividends are paid out. So next is the redeemable shares. Comes with an agreement that the company can buy them back at a future date. So it refers to a type of stock in a corporation share capital that can be redeemed by the corporation. Corporations can have different types of shares in their capital, such as common stocks and preferred stocks. Common stocks or ordinary shares are not redeemable. Supermajority. It refers to the percentage of ownership that is way above the simple majority, which is 1/2 plus 1 share of the total shares outstanding. It is often a requisite for a company to take certain actions, such as amending the character. One issue about supermajority is that of the small business owners who often look for angel investor to increase capitalization of the business. A supermajority is a requirement for a particular measure or legislation to receive significantly more than half of the votes in order for the measure to pass. A supermajority can also be an amendment to a company's corporate charter requiring a larger than normal majority of shareholders to prove important changes in the company. So next is shareholder voting agreements. It is a legal contract among shareholders of a corporation involving voting of shares. Shareholders may choose to pool their votes for a particular goal. A shareholder voting agreement is a contract between two or more shareholders who share their rights to vote on a particular common objective or goal. It gives a shareholder the right to cast their votes in favor of any proposal or cast it against any proposal. It is also termed as pooling agreement. Next is shareholders management agreements. Together with the company's articles of incorporation, which regulates the conduct of the company, what gives investors their most important contractual protections is the shareholders agreement. A shareholders agreement, also called stockholders agreement, it is an arrangement among shareholders that describes how a company should be operated and outlines shareholders' rights and obligations. The agreement also includes the information on the management of the company and privileges and protection of shareholders.
The shareholders management agreements. So together with the company articles of incorporation, which regulates the conduct of the company, that gives investors their most important contractual protections is the shareholders agreement. This agreement will only be relevant, of course, if the corporate structure is being used. Agreements of this kind are by far the most recommendable system or method for the protection of shareholders. So, the main features of a shareholders agreements are board appointment rights, veto rights, adoption and amendment development of business plans and budgets, scope of business, intellectual property rights, right to information, warranties from the management team, strategic investor rights, restrictions on transfer of shares, restrictive covenants, and exit provision. Now let's proceed with the board appointment rights. It is the common for shareholders' agreements to establish the relative rights of representation that the shareholders will have on the company's board of directors of the company. A minority shareholder may seek to have a one director on the board in order to be kept informed of matters discussed at the board level. If we're going to talk about the veto rights refers to the right to overturn decision reached by the board. So this process involves listing of material things that cannot be done without the investor's prior consent and ratification, and this is also normally range from the fundamentals matters such as issuing further shares, commitment of assets, and capital expenditure, and so on. And now let's proceed with adoption and amendment of business plans and budgets. So the agreement may provide a process of adopting and amending business plans and budgets, and it is also to ensure that individual shareholders or their appointed directors are properly represented in that process. So let's proceed with the scope of business. With the scope of business, although this thing can be found in a charter of the corporation, it is common particularly in a joint venture or startup company for the shareholders agreement to specify the scope of the business that the company will conduct and provide that consent, and is also required from the shareholders before the company can change the nature of its business or do some diversification attempts. And let's proceed with the intellectual property rights, where the shareholders parties are contributing unique and distinct advantage or process such as patent, trademark, copyright, or any form of information and competencies to a venture. The shareholders agreement may provide for the ownership and licenses of intellectual property rights, and preserving certain such rights of the parties themselves and other to the company. And this is another common agreement in a joint venture company. Let's proceed with the right to information. It is extremely important for the investors to monitor performance closely, particularly to give them an early warning if things are starting to go wrong. Accordingly, they will expect contractual right to receive regular reports, management accounts, cash flows forecasts, and so on. Together with a statutory account, the investor will also often seek the right to have its own director appointed on the board. Now let's proceed with the warranties from the management team. In general terms, these are a series of statements about the company that the investors would expect to be true and accurate. At a first stage capital raising, it is unlikely that these statements will be little more than confirmations that the theme stands behind its business plan, that the company is clean, and that the team knows of nothing that has been withheld from investors. Let's proceed with the strategic investor rights, where shareholders is looking for a more than a return of investments. The shareholders agreement may provide an opportunity to negotiate terms covering secondary commercial arrangement, such as giving shareholders or its group first right of refusal on certain type of business or contract with a company, or right to be informed of due to co-invest in investments to be made by the company. So let's proceed with the restriction on transfer of shares. The investors will be keen to make sure that the management team they are backing hold on their shares. In certain circumstances, managers will be permitted through an agreement to transfer shares to family or to trust. So let's proceed with the restrictive covenants. So this will make it clear that while members of the management are employed and for a period of time afterwards, they cannot compete with the company or solicit customers or employees. So now let's proceed with the last part, the exit provisions. A shareholding in private company is by its nature illiquid, by there is no market leave and open of the shares. Accordingly, a shareholders agreement will very often include provisions that are intended to encourage or facilitate realization by shareholders of their investments. And this is particularly important for minority shareholders who are unable to control exit process.
Behavioral management theory. Years by management principle developed behavioral management theory relies on the notion that managers will be better understand the human aspects to workers and treat employees as important assets to achieve goals. In short, behavioral management is the theory behind understanding and increasing employee satisfaction to increase productivity within workplace. This is a branch of psychology that focuses on how people learn through their interaction with environment. Elton Mayo. In Elton Mayo theory, this states that employees are motivated far more by relational factors such as attention and camaraderie than by a monetary rewards or environmental factors such as lighting, humidity, and more. This theory emphasizes the need for managers to prioritize the interests of their employee, including appreciating and valuing their opinions. Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow, in his 1943 paper, A Theory of Human Motivation, psychologist Abraham Maslow proposed what is considered the classic theory of needs. He proposed that people are motivated by five categories, which is first, psychological, food, water, shelter. The second is safety, safety or employment assets. Third is belonging and love, or family, friendship, intimacy. Fourth is team, or self-worth, accomplishment, or confidence. Fifth is self-actualization or inner fulfillment. These are represented as pyramid with basic psychological needs such as water and shelter at the base and the need of for self-actualization at the top. Maslow further classified the bottom four levels of pyramid deficiency needs. Nothing the person a person does not feed anything if they are met, but become anxious if they are not. He classified the fifth level, a growth need, which enables a person to self-actualize or self-use fullest potential as a human being. Maslow proposed the human behavior is purposeful and is motivated by the desire to satisfy needs, and the lower level needs must be met before a person can focus on the next level of needs. A need that is satisfied no longer motivates. An unmet need is primary motivator. Thus, Maslow provides manager with visual representation of employee motivation. In contrast, in contrast, in contrast to behavioral management, with its focus on optimizing man as machine. Behavioral management focuses on worker behavior and motivation. Especially behavioral management theory is concerned with how to manage productivity by understanding worker motivation, including expectation, needs, and interests, and also group dynamics. Behavioral management theory is sometimes referred to as the human relation movements due to its focus on the human dimension of work. Theories who contribute to behavior management include Elton Mayo and Abraham Maslow.
Hello, good day. I am Bayro Huniza Maulana and my reporting is about Douglas MacGregor and Frederick Herzberg. Douglas MacGregor was heavily influenced by both the Hawthorne studies and Maslow. He believed that two basic kinds of manager exist. Number one is Theory X manager has a negative view of employees. Number two, Theory Y manager has a positive view of employees. So Theory X manager view employees as lazy and untrustworthy, while Theory Y managers believe in their trustworthiness, capability, and high motivation. MacGregor emphasized that managers' assumption can influence employee behavior, creating self-fulfilling prophecies based on their expectation. Frederick Herzberg, he is a well-respected American who has contributed greatly to the way in which managers think about motivation at work. He made a content theory which explains the factor of an individual's motivation by identifying their needs and desires. Frederick Herzberg, known for his 1959 book, The Motivation to Work, introduced a two-factor content theory often called a two-need system. This theory explores individuals' motivation by identifying their needs, what satisfy those needs, and the goals pursued for satisfaction. Herzberg's original research focused on offices interviewing over 200 employees to identifying highly motivated and satisfied work situations. Later, studies expanded to include a broader sampling of professional individuals. Frederick Herzberg, in his findings, he split his factors of motivation into two categories: hygiene factors and motivation factors. Hygiene factors and motivation factors are two distinct categories in Herzberg's two factors theory explain aspects employees' motivation. Hygiene factors, these factors are essential for preventing dissatisfaction and maintaining a baseline level of contentment in the workplace. Their absence can lead to dissatisfaction, but their presence does not significantly contribute to motivation or job satisfaction. Example is company policy, supervision, relationship with boss, then work conditions, salary, relationship with peers. Ito yung leading to dissatisfaction. So next is motivation factor. Ang motivation factors naman directly contribute to job satisfaction and motivation. They are intrinsic to the work itself and the overall job design. Their presence enhances motivation and satisfaction, while their absence does not necessarily lead to dissatisfaction. Example of motivation factor is achievement, recognition, the work itself, then responsibility and advancement and growth. So basically the hygiene factors focus on preventing dissatisfaction. Then motivation factors are intrinsic elements that directly contribute to job satisfaction and employee motivation. He also developed the concept that there are two distinct human needs, physiological needs and psychological needs. So sa physiological needs and psychological needs are distinct categories in understanding human motivation. Physiological needs, these are basic biological requirements essential for human survival and well-being. Example is food and water, shelter, sleep, and clothing. While psychological needs naman are related to mental and emotional well-being going beyond basic survival. Another example, achievements, recognition, personal growth, and last, autonomy. So psychological needs focus on higher level aspiration related to personal fulfillment and growth. Then ang physiological naman ay fundamental for survival. So both categories contribute to understanding the complex factors that drive human behavior. One of the most important ideas that Herzberg postulated based on his findings of satisfaction is that of job enrichment. It is continuous management process. First, the job must use the full ability of the employee. Second, and provide them with sufficient challenge. Third, any employee who demonstrates an increasing level of ability should be given correspondingly increasing levels of responsibility.
Hello everyone! Good day! I want to talk about reframing organization, a vital concept for managers and advisors. Often the managers rely on the limited models of organization dynamics, but there are four frames that offer broader perspective. Number 1, structure approach focuses on the organizational formal structure. Number 2, political view considers power dynamic and conflict. Number 3, human resource lens emphasize and the relationship. Number 4, symbolic frame explores organization, culture, and identity. Understanding this frame can help managers make more informed decisions. Now, let's proceed to Employee Stock Ownership Plan, or for short, ESOP. It's basically a benefit plan for employees where they get a share of the company's ownership. Kaya heto kung paano kung gumagana kung ikaw ay isang komplikadong empleyado na ibinibigay sa iyo ang iyong employer ang isang tiyak na porsyento ng pag-aari ng kumpanya o ang mga stock nito, at ang maganda pa ang hindi mo kailangan magbayad ng kahit ano. Nung una, para makuha ang mga stock na ito, it's like being given a piece of a pie just for being part of the team. This means that as the company grows and become more successful, the value of your share could up to it's a way from companies to reward employees and make them feel like they are part of the company's success. So, next time you are hear about ESOP, just remember it way employees to own a piece of the company they are work for. It's a pretty neat perk to have. Thank you, that's all.
That's all for Chapter 3. Thank you for listening.